Before we move into ranking the second half of this list, I would like to remind viewers who are watching this as two separate videos that I will be going over some spoilers for all of these movies. So if you haven't seen one of these movies and don't want it spoiled, then you can skip ahead to the next movie, which I'm going to try to set up as chapters to make that a little easier for you. But getting started with the second half of this list, we have another A24 horror movie, The Lighthouse. This is a wild and confusing movie that is absolutely carried by the incredible performances by Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe. I think they arguably both give the best performance of their career here, and it's just a joy to watch. The story of two lighthouse workers who are completely alone on an isolated island is thoroughly weird and creepy as they slowly lose track of what's real and what isn't, and things only continue to escalate from there. The choice to make this movie black and white also definitely aided in creating that isolated and cold atmosphere that the director was going for. So I love this movie, and I would definitely put it on the great tier. Keeping with the A24 theme, we have their third and final appearance on this list with Hereditary. This is easily one of the movies on this list which scared me the most. It's also another movie which I thought had two incredible performances by Toni Collette and Alex Wolff. When this movie came out, I saw that it was getting a lot of praise, and that's really what convinced me to watch it, and I'm very glad that I did. I do think that this movie in particular works best if you go into it knowing as little as possible. So I'm not going to talk about the plot here very much, but this is absolutely an amazing movie that I would recommend to anyone who's a horror movie fan. It's also another movie that I'm going to put in the amazing tier very confidently. Moving on now into the 13th movie on this list, we have Escape Room. This is yet another one of those newer horror movies that I saw when it came out, and it far surpassed my expectations. This movie was clearly released as a way to try to capitalize on the popularity surge that escape rooms have had over the last 5 years or so. But along the way, they managed to make a genuinely entertaining movie that almost feels like a basic blueprint for the show Squid Game, which came out recently on Netflix, which is also an amazing show. If you haven't seen that, you should go watch that. But as the characters continue to move through more and more stages of this deadly escape room, the stakes are effectively raised, and we learn more about the people in the escape room and why they make the choices that they make. So while it isn't quite a top-notch horror movie, I would definitely put Escape Room in the good tier. And just as a reminder, even though the good tier is the bottom tier on this specific list, I still very much like all the movies in that tier. But there always has to be a bottom tier on one of these lists, and it just so happens to be the good tier for this list. And now we have The Invisible Man. I believe that this is the newest movie on this list, and it is also one that is carried by the acting of its main character, Cecilia, played by Elizabeth Moss. She does a great job as this woman who knows that what she's experiencing is real, but everyone around her just thinks that she's gone crazy. While it wasn't wholly original, and I thought it was done quite well, and I did enjoy watching. I thought that the sequence in the psychiatric hospital towards the end of the movie was particularly entertaining and thrilling. So while this wasn't a particularly standout horror movie for me, I would still put The Invisible Man strongly in the good tier. Up next, we have a movie that completely blew me away when I first watched it for the first time, Scream. This Wes Craven directed movie is part horror and also part comedy, and I think that made for a very fresh and entertaining horror movie. Throughout the movie, the characters make commentary and jokes about the tropes that horror movies are known for, and I think it also does a good job of not falling into those tropes unless it's for an intentional joke or a well-designed twist. I thought the acting was perfect for this style of movie, especially from Matthew Lillard, who was the standout for me. I enjoyed this movie from start to finish, and I will absolutely be putting Scream in the amazing tier, and this is another one that is a contender for that best tier at the end of the video. Now we have another movie that some people might not consider to be horror, but I certainly do, and that's Jaws. This movie essentially invented the summer blockbuster and is iconic for a number of reasons. The opening sequence of the girl swimming in the ocean at night and getting pulled under by the shark still scares me, and there are a handful of other scenes throughout the movie that capture a similar sense of fear from this menacing and brutal shark. Jaws also managed to rejuvenate the creature feature style of horror films, and I think it still holds up as the best of those type of movies to this day. And of course, the theme song that plays whenever the shark is coming in for an attack is iconic as well. So Jaws is definitely a movie that I'm going to put in the amazing tier. The next movie on this list is Don't Breathe. This is another movie which I watched specifically for this list because I had heard good things about it, and I have to say that I definitely enjoyed this movie. There were several scenes that evoked real tension and fear, so I think they pulled off the horror aspect quite well. I also really enjoyed the fact that essentially the whole movie takes place in one house, and every time you think that the main characters are going to find a way out, there's another twist that shows up to stop them, but none of those twists were bad or ruined the movie for me. I thought that the basement sequence, when they first discover the girl down there and then the lights get shut off, was the strongest section of the movie. There was one scene that was kind of gross, and if you've seen the movie, you'll know exactly what scene I'm talking about. But that scene aside, I definitely thought that this was a great horror movie, so I'm going to put it into the great tier. Up next, we have the classic Friday the 13th. This is one of the movies that I watched specifically for this list, and I'm glad that I did. It was easily the movie on this list that scared me the most while I was watching it. The fear didn't stick with me quite the same way it did from a movie like Hereditary, but in the moment, I was thoroughly freaked out. One of the directing choices that I thought was brilliant for this movie was there's several scenes where the way that the camera work is done, you can never tell whether the killer is actually walking up on someone or if it's just a slow zoom in shot. So I think that those type of shots really built the tension of never really knowing when someone was going to be attacked or when someone was about to die. And I thought that that was really, really good directing. It's pretty easy to see why this movie became a classic. The jump scares are top notch, especially Kevin Bacon's death, and the music is of course iconic, and there are so many little plot points that got used over and over again in other movies that were taken from this movie. I do think that once you find out who the villain is, because in the original, Jason isn't the killer, it's actually his mom. So once you find that out, it kind of takes away a lot of the fear in the final act of the movie, suffers for that, but still easily a great horror movie, so I'm going to place this on the great tier. And now with the last two movies on this list, the only franchise with multiple movies, Halloween from 1978 and Halloween from 2018. The 1978 Halloween movie is another all-time classic, and for good reason. I think Michael Myers is easily the scariest of the big three horror villains between him, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger. I also thought that the plot was surprisingly tight and well crafted. In my opinion, I think the scariest element of this movie was the scenes in which you can hear Michael Myers breathing through the mask. Something about that just irked me. And the scene when Jamie Lee Curtis is hiding in the closet and Michael is breaking through the closet doors to come after her was also very tense and fearful. So between a great villain, a solid story, and a handful of really good scares, I think that the 1978 Halloween is a great movie, so I'm going to place it on the great tier. And the final movie on this list is the 2018 Halloween. As far as I'm aware, I believe that this is intended to be a 40-year later direct sequel to the original Halloween movie, which I think was a great decision. That meant that the writers and everyone involved with the movie didn't have to try to worry about the continuity of the other Halloween sequels, which most people agree aren't very good. There's a lot of similarities between this movie and the original plot-wise, but there are also some new creative elements added. This time, when Michael Myers escapes, Jamie Lee Curtis is waiting for him, and she has trained her daughter so that they can defend themselves against him and try to kill him. Jamie Lee Curtis gives a great performance as this woman who is truly haunted by the events of the original film, and she tries desperately to get the people around her to believe her, and so that they can be prepared to save themselves. The graphics in this movie are also much more violent and more realistic than the original, which adds a lot in terms of gore horror. And I usually hate gore horror, but I think this movie has just enough of it to scare me but not disgust me. So while I don't think this movie quite captures the magic of the original, I would still put Halloween 2018 in the great tier. And here we are at the final part of this video where I'm going to order these movies within the tiers so that you can see my top 20 in order. At the bottom of the good tier, I'm going to put Happy Death Day, and then Ready or Not, followed by Escape Room and It, and then The Platform and The Invisible Man at the top of the good tier. Moving up to the great tier, I'm going to start with The Autopsy of Jane Doe, and then Don't Breathe, and then followed by Halloween 2018, and then The Witch, and then Halloween 1978, and then Friday the 13th, The Lighthouse, and Us at the top of the great tier. Then moving up into the amazing tier, I'm going to start with Jaws, and then The Ritual, and then Hereditary after that, followed by Alien. And then between Get Out and Scream, these are two very different horror movies, but I just had more fun with Scream, so I'm going to put Get Out in second, which means that in the best tier, we have Scream, my personal favorite horror movie. And there we have it, my 20 favorite horror movies ranked from 20th to 1st and within these tiers. And that brings us to the end of the video, so thank you for watching. Special thank you if you watched all the way through. As a reminder, I will be posting my spy movie ranking in a few days, and I will be trying to keep a schedule of 1 or 2 videos per week in the upcoming weeks. So turn on post notifications if you want to be one of the first people to see those videos. And thanks again for watching. If you liked the video, please leave a like. If you think one of these movies should move up or down, let me know in the comments. Also, let me know if you have a different favorite, and I will respond to as many of the comments as I can. If you would like to see more videos about movies, please consider subscribing to stay up to date and to help my channel grow. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.